Hi, and welcome to presentation number 2 of Module 2 of Laser Classrooms, Bringing STEM to Light. In this module, we'll find the 5 E's inside of the Classroom Cave activity. So to review quickly, the 5 E's are engage, explore, explain, elaborate, and evaluate. And the 5E model is a pedagogical model that assumes active participation by the student at each phase of learning. And it also assumes a constructionist approach, which means that it builds on the idea that new learning always happens on top of old learning. So it is a scaffolding approach, but it does hold some room for moving through the scaffold process iteratively. So while you will move generally from engage to evaluate, there may be some back and forth and some room for adjusting that. Also, rarely do the 5 E's all happen in one lesson. More often, they occur across an entire unit. But let's take a look a little more deeply into what we mean by engage. So when you're going to engage the classroom, you're going to do this at the beginning. It's going to be brief. It will probably be just a part of a lesson. Sometimes you can use an entire lesson to get kids engaged in a bigger topic, but quite often it's brief. And it's an opportunity to create a wonderful moment. And by that, I mean a moment which inspires wonder. And so you might be doing something that's going to raise some questions. You might present a discrepant event, something that has kids go, wait a minute, that's not what I was expecting. It's the time to demonstrate a phenomenon if you're going to, something that's flashy, something that looks really impressive. With light, that's often very easy to do. It also might look like having having your students explore a website or watch a video before you get on to the lesson. The important thing to understand about engage is that while it is something wonderful and wowing, it's also going to involve a task that assesses the learner's prior knowledge and helps them get engaged actually in the concept. So we want to do just a little more than just to wow them. We want to promote some curiosity and elicit knowledge and perhaps organize their thinking in the direction of where we want them to go in terms of learning outcomes. So let's consider the definition of engage and the classroom cave. So within this activity, we had this brief opening activity of creating a problem by darkening the room and then asking some questions that in fact do draw on their prior knowledge and experience of light and dark. Why can't you see in the dark? Where else is it dark? That gets them thinking about light and dark and the things we want them to think about, and it has them draw on what they already understand. It also frames the main ideas that light is required to see, and very straightforwardly and simply, it demonstrates the phenomenon of light versus dark, which is what we want them to be thinking about as we move ahead in the lesson. As an activity for a unit on light, the entire classroom cave activity actually presents a discrepant event by asking them to predict what they think they'll find in the cave and having them draw on their prior understanding of maybe light colors, maybe shiny objects, and then discovering that what they understand about light-colored objects and shiny objects is actually incomplete, that without light, it doesn't really matter that it's a light-colored object or a shiny object. They can't see it. So it begins to create some curiosity and interest in the phenomenon of light, and it raises questions, and it encourages them to create their own responses by actively engaging them in creating their own predictions and then testing what happens. What about explore? So explore is the time to provide students with a common base of activities that help them use their prior knowledge to generate new ideas and explore questions and possibilities and perhaps design and conduct a preliminary investigation. So you're going to be the facilitator here. You're going to facilitate kids beginning to explore some inquiry-oriented questions. It gives them time to think and reflect not only on what they have known before, but what they're experiencing as a result of this activity. And while the activity or experiment is structured, it's loosely structured, and there isn't a lot of information delivery at this point. Kids are still having an experience that lets them uncover and explore a new situation or a new phenomenon. So what about the classroom cave? How does explore pertain to the classroom cave? What did you find when you went back and looked? When I looked, what I saw was that within the activity, you are in fact acting as the facilitator for a loosely structured activity. You're really not delivering a lot of information. You're guiding them through their own discovery process. It does present some inquiry-oriented questions. Which dolls do you think you'll be able to find? Why can't you find the dolls? And what do you need in order to be able to find them? These are all leading questions that move them in the direction of understanding what you want them to understand, but it allows them to begin uncovering it themselves. It also establishes a relationship between light and vision, and it introduces some science processes. They are going to actually make a prediction, test the prediction, and record their observation, and in the end, draw a conclusion and create an explanation. And that is science. As an activity for a unit, it does establish a common experience and a foundation of understanding on which you can build future understanding. So it really creates a basis of information, a basic common experience for everybody in the classroom as a activity for you to build on as you move forward with a unit of light, which is why that's where we started. Explain. So explain is a place to be more specific and explicit about what we have learned and what it is we're trying to learn. During the explain phase, we want to invite students to demonstrate their own conceptual understanding or process skills, and then it's also a time where the teacher can directly introduce content, whether it's concepts, processes, or skills. It's a time to provide definitions and language, provide justification and clarification. And if you're going to deliver a lecture, now that the pump has been primed, so to speak, now is the time to do it. So what about the classroom cave? Where did we see explain with the classroom cave? So within the activity, students do explain their own observations, and in the end, we're going to ask them to draw a model of how we see. So that is an explanation of what they have learned. Explanations and vocabulary are also introduced. At least we're going to introduce maybe the terms illumination, vision, and the idea and concept that light comes from a source and perhaps is reflected. So we've got reflection, we've got light source, we've got some new information that we're delivering at this point. And then as an activity, it's the same. It's the same as an activity within a unit. And what about elaborate? So in elaborate, we're going to ask students to expand on their conceptual understanding, and we're going to challenge them so that they can develop a deeper and broader understanding and add more information to what we have already given them. It extends and reinforces the new knowledge that they have recently gained. We're going to ask them to apply to novel situations, and they're going to probe and make some reasonable judgments using their new information. At the very beginning of the Classroom Cave activity, we ask them, where else is it dark? So we're going to ask them to expand on their understanding of darkness. What are some other sources of light? They may start with the room lights, and then they may think of a candle or a sun and start thinking more broadly about light. And what else can we learn about light? We can ask them now that they're done with that. You can also um, have them elaborate by asking, what if we were outside in the night? How would we be able to find our way around? We would need a source of light. And that's taking what they learned about the cave and extending it to any dark place and any source of light. And it sets the stage for learning more about light. Evaluate is a time to assess um, the learning that has happened. And with the 5E model, we want to encourage students to do some assessment of their own understanding and abilities and provide opportunities for you to evaluate their progress. And evaluate, again, can happen at the very end, or it may happen iteratively throughout as you move forward. And ways to keep evaluate inside of the 5E model is to ask students perhaps to produce a product or to ask them open-ended questions having to do with measuring, how much, comparison. If this happens, then what happens? Or asking a what if question. What if I were to be somewhere else where there wasn't light? So, how would you evaluate student learning following the classroom cave activity? What would you do to assess what kids had gotten out of it and to ensure that everyone was at the same place? Head on over to the discussion section and tell me what you think, and I will see you in the next presentation.